For much of its modern history, Britain's global influence was inextricably linked to its military strength. From colonial expeditions to participation in major world conflicts, the armed forces played a pivotal role in shaping the nation's identity and projecting its power across the globe. Britain was a military superpower, a force to be reckoned with on land, sea, and air. The Royal Navy commanded the oceans. British troops were stationed in strategic locations worldwide, and the nation possessed a formidable arsenal of weaponry. This military dominance was underpinned by substantial investment, with the nation dedicating around 7.5% of its GDP to defense in the 1950s. This level of spending reflected the perceived threat of the Cold War and Britain's commitment to maintaining its global standing. The armed forces were vast, comprising hundreds of thousands of personnel and a vast array of equipment, from tanks and aircraft to warships and artillery. Military service was a common experience for many young Britons, and the armed forces were a significant employer. British military personnel were stationed globally, a legacy of empire and a statement of intent to protect British interests and maintain international stability. From Europe to Asia, Africa to the Americas, British forces were a visible presence on the world stage. But as the threat of major war faded with the end of the Cold War, and the welfare state expanded, demanding greater resources for social programs, priorities shifted, leading to a gradual re-evaluation of defense spending. Health spending rose steadily, reflecting a growing emphasis on social welfare and the increasing demands of an aging population. The National Health Service became a cornerstone of British society, consuming an ever larger share of the national budget, while defense spending shrank as successive governments sought to balance the books and prioritize social programs over military might. Military bases were closed, equipment was decommissioned, and the size of the armed forces was reduced. By the 2020s, defense was down to just 2% of GDP, a fraction of its Cold War peak, reflecting a significant shift in national priorities and a changing geopolitical landscape. While health soared above 7%, becoming one of the largest items in the government's budget. This disparity highlighted the growing divergence between spending on social welfare and defense. The British Army is now set to be its smallest since the Napoleonic Wars, a stark reminder of the decline in Britain's military capabilities. The reduction in troop numbers has raised concerns about the Army's ability to meet its commitments and respond to emerging threats. Britain today boasts a world-class NHS providing comprehensive health care to all citizens, but a military stretched thin, struggling to maintain its readiness and effectiveness with limited resources. Facing aging equipment, much of which is nearing the end of its service life and in need of replacement, and recruitment challenges as the armed forces struggle to attract and retain qualified personnel in a competitive job market. This long shift from military might to welfare state sets the stage for today's tough choices, forcing policymakers to grapple with difficult questions about how to balance competing priorities and ensure the nation's security in an uncertain world. NATO, founded in 1949, promised collective security but expected all members to contribute. In 2014, after Russia annexed Crimea, NATO set a formal goal. Members should spend at least 2% of GDP on defense. The UK has consistently met this target, but most allies lagged behind until recently. Russia's invasion of Ukraine changed everything. Now, over two-thirds of NATO members meet the goal. Some, like Poland, spend over 4%, while the US remains the alliance's financial backbone. This 2% isn't just a number. It's a symbol of solidarity and commitment. For the UK, meeting it is about maintaining its leadership in European defense. But the alliance's reliance on US spending remains a source of tension. In an increasingly uncertain world, the question of defense spending looms large. Can the UK truly afford to allocate more resources to its armed forces? It's a question that demands careful consideration, weighing the needs of national security against the realities of the economic landscape. The answer, as always, starts with the economy. A strong economy provides the foundation for a strong defense. But the UK's economic growth has been sluggish for over a decade, a period marked by uncertainty and global challenges. This prolonged period of slow growth has had a significant impact on the nation's finances, and the result is that public debt now equals the nation's entire annual output. This staggering figure represents the accumulation of years of borrowing and spending, a burden that weighs heavily on the nation's future. Servicing this debt, simply paying the interest on what's been borrowed, costs taxpayers a staggering £100 billion a year. That's money that could be invested in other vital public services. It's more than the entire budget for education, a sector crucial for the future prosperity of the nation. And it's nearly as much as the entire defense budget itself, highlighting the immense financial strain the national debt places on the country. In the current fiscal climate, every pound is already spoken for, allocated to essential services and existing commitments. This leaves very little room for new spending initiatives, no matter how vital they may seem. The coffers are bare, and the options are limited. Therefore, any significant increase in defense spending inevitably means tough choices must be made by government ministers. These choices could include higher taxes for working families and businesses, or cuts to other essential public services elsewhere, impacting the lives of ordinary citizens. The final option is more borrowing, further increasing the national debt and burdening future generations. The government faces a tight fiscal squeeze, a situation where financial resources are severely limited and carefully managed. This leaves little flexibility in the budget, making it difficult to respond to unexpected events or new priorities. Raising defense spending in this environment isn't simply about finding spare change down the back of the sofa. It's about finding billions of pounds, a substantial sum that requires significant adjustments to the overall budget. In this environment, every decision comes with real trade-offs, meaning that choosing one option inevitably means giving up something else. The challenge is not just what to spend the money on, identifying the areas where investment is most needed, but also what to sacrifice in order to make that spending possible, making difficult choices that will inevitably impact different sectors of society. In Britain, public opinion has long favored butter, the NHS and social programs, over guns. The NHS consistently tops spending priorities, while defense ranks much lower. The needs of healthcare feel immediate and personal. Military threats seem distant. Politicians know cutting the NHS for more tanks is political suicide. Even as global threats rise, voters remain wary of sacrificing social services for defense. The war in Ukraine has nudged opinions but not fundamentally changed them. The government is caught between NATO pressure and public demand for strong public services. The guns versus butter debate is alive and unresolved. With global threats rising, both major UK parties have pledged to boost defense spending to 2.6% of GDP by 2027. This would put the UK well above NATO's minimum, reaffirming its leadership. But the government has ruled out raising major taxes, given the cost of living crisis. The plan relies on economic growth and cuts elsewhere, especially to the foreign aid budget. Redirecting aid is less controversial than cutting domestic services, but still contentious. Success depends on the economy performing as hoped and finding real savings. The commitment is bold, but the path is fraught with political and economic risks. Defense spending is often seen as a cost, but it can also drive economic growth if invested wisely. The UK's defense industry employs over 260,000 people and supports high-tech innovation. Long-term, stable funding lets companies invest in skills and research, benefiting the wider economy. Military R&D can spark civilian breakthroughs. Think GPS or the Internet. But the UK's defense R&D budget is small, and procurement is often slow and inefficient. To truly boost the economy, the government must overhaul how it buys equipment and support British industry. Smart investment could make the UK a leader in future technologies. But without reform, higher spending risks waste and missed opportunities. The ongoing debate over the United Kingdom's defense spending isn't happening in a vacuum. It's profoundly shaped by a series of global shocks and seismic shifts in the international landscape. These events have forced a reassessment of priorities and a hard look at the resources allocated to national security. Most notably, Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine stands as a stark reminder of the fragility of peace in Europe and the ever-present threat of state-on-state conflict. The brutal war in Europe has shattered long-held assumptions about a stable and secure continent, revealing the potential for rapid escalation and widespread devastation. The scale of destruction has been a rude awakening. This new reality has driven a renewed urgency for rearmament across Europe and beyond, with nations scrambling to bolster their defenses and deter potential aggressors. The demand for military hardware and advanced weaponry has surged. In response, NATO now sees the commitment of 2% of GDP to defense spending as a floor, not a ceiling, signaling a fundamental shift in the alliance's approach to burden sharing and collective security. And some leaders are now calling for even higher targets, recognizing that the current geopolitical climate demands a more robust and sustained investment in military capabilities. The debate is shifting towards what constitutes an adequate level of defense preparedness. Adding to the complexity is the growing uncertainty in U.S. politics, particularly regarding the future of American foreign policy commitments. Especially the prospect of another Trump presidency has raised concerns among European allies about the reliability of U.S. security guarantees and the potential for a more isolationist American stance. This uncertainty has, in turn, made Europe rethink its long-standing reliance on America for its defense, prompting a renewed focus on building its own military capabilities and strategic autonomy. In this evolving landscape, the UK is actively forging closer defense ties with Europe, seeking to strengthen cooperation and enhance its role in regional security initiatives. This includes a new pact with the EU aimed at fostering greater collaboration on defense matters and addressing shared security challenges. Taken together, these events signal the definitive end of the peace dividend era, a period characterized by declining defense budgets and a focus on soft power. Britain now faces a new reality, one in which the threats are more complex, the geopolitical landscape is more volatile, and the need for robust defense capabilities is more pressing than ever. In this context, sustained investment in defense is no longer an optional extra, but a fundamental requirement for safeguarding national security and projecting influence on the world stage. The world has changed profoundly, and so too must the UK's priorities, with a renewed emphasis on defense and security in an increasingly uncertain and dangerous world. Some argue even 2.6% isn't enough, calling for defense spending to hit 5% of GDP. That would mean finding an extra £87 billion a year, equal to the entire education budget. Such a leap would require deep cuts to public services or major tax hikes. It would also add hundreds of billions to the national debt, risking higher interest rates and economic instability. This would fundamentally reshape Britain, shifting from a welfare state to a security state. The choice is stark: unprecedented security or the social model the public values. The 5% debate forces Britain to confront what kind of country it wants to be. Britain stands at a crossroads, balancing security needs with economic and social realities. The commitment to 2.6% is a big step, but the path is narrow and full of trade-offs. Every pound for defense is a pound not spent on nurses' schools or roads. Public support for the NHS remains strong, so the government must make a compelling case for higher defense spending. Success will require a clear strategy procurement reform and honest debate about costs and choices. Britain must fund a credible military without crippling public services or the economy. The decisions made now will shape Britain's role in the world for decades. The stakes could not be higher.